All please rise. The New York State Attorney General, Leticia James. The President of the New York State Bar Association, Michael Miller. The Associate Judges, the New York State Court of Appeals, Judge Jenny Rivera. Judge Leslie Stein. Judge Eugene Fahey. Judge Michael Garcia. Judge Rowan Wilson. Judge Paul Feynman. The Chief Administrative Judge of the Unified Court System, Judge Lawrence Marx. And the Chief Judge of the State of New York, Judge Janet DeFiore.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone, I should say. Please be seated, everyone. Welcome all to beautiful Court of Appeals Hall, and welcome to Law Day. It is indeed a great privilege each year for our court to host this wonderful, wonderful tradition, which is, as you may know, a national day set aside beginning back in 1958 by President Eisenhower during the height of the Cold War to celebrate our nation's commitment to democracy and the rule of law. This year, once again, our court is honored to co-host our Law Day ceremony along with our new Attorney General for the state of New York, Leticia James. We are also pleased to have with us the President of the New York State Bar Association, Michael Miller, who is the leader of the nation's largest voluntary bar association, over 70,000 lawyers working to advance our profession and support the rule of law. Also joining us today are many dignitaries and elected officials, and in order to show our respect and appreciation for their service, I would like to take a moment to thank them and acknowledge them for taking the time out of their busy days to join us today. Starting with our presiding justices of the Appellate Division, Rolando Acosta from the First Department, Alan Shankman from the Second, and Elizabeth Gary from the Third. Our former Court of Appeals colleague, Robert Smith, thank you for being here, Judge. Former PJs of the Appellate Divisions, Judge Betty Ellerin from the First, and happy birthday to you, my friend. Former PJ of the Second, Randy Yang, and of the Third, Karen Peters. Our Deputy Chief Administrative Judges, very important positions, Michael Kokoma and George Silver. And we're pleased to have such a large number of Associate Justices from our Appellate Division departments from across the state, our administrative judges who do the really tough work for us, as well as our supervising judges. Thank you all for being here. The United States Attorney for the Northern District of New York, Grant Jequith. Thank you, Grant, for being here. And from the Executive Chamber, our friend and colleague and supporter, counsel to the governor, Alfonso David. Thank you, Mr. David, for being here today, along with members of the executive branch and the governor's executive staff, including Michael Green, chair of DCJS, as well as Bill Leahy, I know I saw him right here, who is in a very important statewide position as director of the New York State Office of Indigent Legal Services. Thank you for being here, Bill. Our Solicitor General, Barbara Underwood, thank you for being here. And of course, the leaders and members of the state legislature, including the Judiciary Chair, Jeff Dinowitz, who has been a wonderful partner and supporter, and the Assistant Speaker, Felix Ortiz. Our dear friend and supporter, Helene Barnett, who chairs our Permanent Commission on Access to Justice, is with her, and we thank her for her many, many years of service to the people across this state. Our elected district attorneys. Where are our elected district attorneys? They're here somewhere. Okay. We have Madeline Singas from Nassau County, Eric Gonzalez from Kings County, Tim Sinney from Suffolk County, Joseph Stanzione from Greene County. Thank you for being here. Our bar leaders, very important to our profession, those who selflessly devote countless hours to the improvement and support of our legal profession. President-elect of the New York State Bar, Hank Greenberg, I believe is in the audience somewhere. Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. President of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association, David Otto. President of the Albany County Bar Association, Daniel Hertow. And President of the Columbian Lawyers Association, Joseph Mariah. Thank you for being here, Joe. So, each year, the American Bar Association selects a theme for Law Day events which take place all across the country. And this year's theme, Free Speech, Free Press, Free Society, invites all of us to consider the relationship between our cherished American freedoms and the rule of law in our society. And in a moment, we will hear the thoughtful perspective of our Attorney General James and from President Michael Miller. Following their remarks, we'll move, along with Judge Marx, to the fun part of the show, which is the dispensing of the awards and acknowledgement of service in our communities. But first, we'll begin the ceremony today with the Pledge of Allegiance. And we have a special treat to lead us in reciting the pledge. We've invited 3 most outstanding Schenectady High School students and junior ROTC cadets, Omesh Ramatar, Devona Kalacharan, and Anthony Biram, who between them, and listen to this, between them have already devoted 800 hours of service to residents in their community in Schenectady. Thank you. So if you will all please rise and face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your service to your community. At this time, please be seated, everyone. Oh, actually, please remain standing, because at this time, we're going to hear from our favorite court officer, Sergeant, who can sing. I have to qualify that. So, Peter Robinson from the 8th Judicial District. Thank you for being here, Sergeant.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Sergeant, and please be seated, everyone. So the First Amendment of our federal Constitution contains only 45 words protecting freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. These are among the rights that we as Americans hold dear, and they are at the heart of our democratic tradition. They also reflect our unwavering commitment to an open culture that values and protects human expression and conscience. Freedom of speech and press enable us to be active participants in our democracy, providing us with the information and the means by which we can debate the issues of the day, evaluate the performance of our elected officials, wisely exercise our right to vote, and help to shape the direction of our nation's policies. On this day, focused on the purposes of the First Amendment, we pay special attention to the significant ways in which the internet and social media are changing the style and substance of our democratic participation and putting the rule of law under ever-increasing pressure. Are the sound bites and snapshots by which we regularly consume information and express our views sufficient? What's causing the distressing decline in civic knowledge across our society? And how can we prevent the noxious attacks on judges, which are intended to politicize our courts and undermine public confidence in the impartiality of the judiciary? As lawyers who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, it is up to us to push back firmly against those who seek to intimidate judges and influence their future decisions. But that's not enough. The founders of our nation recognized from the outset that we cannot have a viable democracy without an informed electorate, a public lacking basic literacy about the roles and functions of the three branches of government, or about constitutional imperatives like separation of powers and judicial independence, is at great risk of falling prey to propaganda and the kinds of attacks on judges that we have witnessed recently, attacks that seek to undermine public confidence and respect for our courts and our very system of justice. Yet, all that said, I am encouraged by many things, and I'm encouraged that my friend, Hank Greenberg, President-elect of the New York State Bar Association, not only shares my concerns, but understands that our legal profession has a responsibility to take a leadership role in promoting public understanding and support for the rule of law. President-elect Greenberg and I have committed to bringing the bar and the bench together to host a national convocation early next year focused on the ways in which our legal profession can engage and work with schools and the media to develop effective strategies and programs to increase public knowledge regarding government, our democratic institutions, our courts, and the importance of the rule of law. As Chief Judge, the public's confidence in the work of our courts is always a paramount concern in my mind. It is the stimulus for everything we do, including our Excellence Initiative, because when the people we serve value and respect our work and understand our role, we are fully empowered to carry out our constitutional mission, peacefully resolving disputes while protecting cherished rights and upholding the rule of law. Now, the judiciary, however, is not the only institution charged with protecting our rights and upholding the rule of law in New York State. The Attorney General is both the state's chief legal officer and the people's lawyer, responsible for advising the executive branch, defending actions and proceedings taken against the state, and serving as the legal guardian of the rights of all New Yorkers. And that, in fact, well describes the role of our next speaker, the 67th Attorney General for the state of New York, Leticia James, who is today making her inaugural appearance as Law Day's keynote speaker here at our Court of Appeals celebration. Attorney General James, it is a great pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of all of us on this wonderful, wonderful Law Day. Please take the floor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I want to thank Judge DiFiore for inviting me to be with you here at the Court of Appeals in celebration of this year's Law Day. I also wish to thank you for your leadership and for everything that you do for the people of our great state of New York. I am also honored to be here today with our State Bar Association President, Mr. Michael Miller, our Chief Administrative Judge, Judge Marx, and with all of you. It's also an honor and a privilege to be with the Solicitor General of the great state of New York, Ms. Barbara Underwood, as well as the Counsel for the Governor, Alfonso David. And it's wonderful to see so many distinguished jurists here, legislators, executive branch representatives, and legal professions. On Law Day, we come together to celebrate and explore the rule of law, the set of guidelines that allow us to navigate our country and our people through times of turbulence and triumph, of right and wrong, of progress and peril. As George Washington so early and astutely put it, the due administration of justice is the firmest pillars of good government. And without the processes of our legal system ensuring that it functions properly and fairly, we would all be lost. But today we come together specifically to explore one of the most foundational yet often amorphous principles of our legal system and our democracy. Since the earliest of times, the concept of freedom of speech has been a fundamental part of democracy. The ancient Greeks pioneered the concept and understood the power and necessity of granting people the freedom to act and speak as they felt. The principles of free speech, of applying critical thinking to the world around us, and allowing for uncensored thoughts help to fuel their theater, literature, and philosophy. And while certainly not without detractors and constraints, the Greeks established this right to express opinions without government restraint. Although centuries have passed, the core values developed then are still at play now. The very heart of a free society is the ability to express and to speak and to criticize freely. But throughout history, free speech has never been absolute. And how we decide where to draw those lines help to define our time in history. And too often, we have let the passions of the day sweep aside what should be eternal principles. During the First World War, individuals were jailed for handing out leaflets in protest of the war. State bans on teaching the theory of evolution and state requirements that school children must salute the flag have been wrestled with and discarded as antithetical to our values. The First Amendment has certainly been tested. Its interpretations evolved. Its applications has changed over the years. And as members of the bar and lawmakers, we have the good fortune of playing a role in the perpetual weighing of the interests that help us to determine where lines are drawn. And we are fortunate to live in a country and in a state where this right is more protected than anywhere else in the world at any time in history. But in recent times, we have felt the threats to this fundamental principle, both at home and abroad. We have been tested once again. Attacks on the press have eroded the public's trust, testing the boundaries of our democracy. Internationally, we have seen foreign powers that want to exert total control over their people and their reign, jailing those who speak out against their rule, or even worse, killing reporters who attempt to reveal the truth of their nefarious ways. We have an obligation to stand up. An obligation to stand up and speak out against this abuse of power and tyrannical behavior. But we are also seeing this at home in a new form. We see hate groups rising once again, spreading their message of bigotry and horror. Groups that attempt to twist the words and the meaning of the First Amendment that James Madison penned some 230 years ago. One must look no further than the tragic events that took place in Charlottesville in August 2017, where white supremacists tried to argue that freedom of speech gave them license to speak and to act hatefully. But we know better. Freedom of speech must never, ever be confused with the freedom to incite violence. And that is exactly what they did, marching through the streets of Charlottesville with torches and chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and "blood and soil," words adopted from Nazi Germany and white supremacists. These individuals incited fear and violence that left countless people injured and stole the life of a young, brave woman. Our country has a long and tragic and painful history with racism and anti-Semitism and discrimination. And while our laws are supposed to protect against this hate, the words of the First Amendment do not explicitly clarify what is protected, and that has been up to the courts to decide. As judges, as legal professionals, lawmakers, and concerned citizens, regardless of your political affiliation, we shoulder the burden and responsibility of delicately but authoritatively navigating the First Amendment. We are the custodians and caretakers of the rights granted by the First Amendment, rights that are both essential and complex. They are as essential as it comes when establishing a democracy and protecting individual liberty. And so we must find a way to navigate through today's challenges without surrendering constitutional rights to the passions of this moment. As Justice Cardozo said, freedom of speech is the matrix, the indispensable condition of nearly every other form of freedom. But it also ensures that there will be difficult discussions and criticism and new and novel questions ushered in by every generation. One of the fundamental cases that we all learned in law school is that of the ACLU defending the free speech of a group of neo-Nazis who sought to march through the Jewish town of Skokie, Illinois in the late 70s. The neo-Nazis claimed the right of free speech, and the Jewish residents of Skokie claimed the right to live without intimidation and without fear. And the challenge here was clear. There was a need to defend the protections granted by the First Amendment. But in doing so, we wrestled with the question, were we condoning the use of hateful dialogue and the spreading of fear? And that has been the question of years of legal practice regarding the First Amendment, balancing our moral obligations with our legal obligations. Skokie, Illinois, Charlottesville, Virginia, are perfect examples of the type of painful and inconvenient and complex situations that are an outgrowth of robust First Amendment protections. And the challenge of our day will be distinguishing abhorrent but permissible contributions to the marketplace of ideas versus incitements to imminent violence that fall outside the scope of the law's protections. And so it is up to us to prove ourselves worthy of this moment. From the right to ridiculous, to the right to rebel, to the right to resist, and even reignite hateful ideas. This is a fundamental gateway into freedom and an open society, a gateway that cannot be closed. And we know that when democracy actually becomes instilled in a society and in a country, one of the benchmarks of democracy actually seeping into the soul of a nation is the freedom of the press. According to Reporters Without Borders, 76% of the countries across the world are considered to have problematic, difficult, or very serious problems associated with the media climate. To put real lives to that statistics, in 2018, 66 journalists, 13 citizen journalists, and 5 media assistants were killed while working. A true and devastating reminder of all that isn't free across the world, but more importantly, all that is at stake in this country. And there are many more members of the press who are imprisoned because of their work. And this, my friends, is unacceptable. More than 1/3 of the world's people live in countries where there is no press freedom whatsoever, only exposed to news put out by state-run and controlled outlets. And while those state-run outlets might be confined to countries far away, The painful truth is that the situation is getting increasingly worse in America. With the rhetoric coming from the federal government and the attacks made daily on news organizations, America is not living up to our legacy as a beacon of transparency. You see, I reject the characterization that the media is an enemy of the people. And so have our reporters. Our reporters have marched on. They've defended by those of us in government who may not like the criticism, may not like the fulfilling of those FOIL requests. But know that the free press and the ability to be criticized and held accountable makes us all better public servants. And we've certainly seen our tradition of having a free press pay dividends in terms of accountability. We saw excerpts of the Mueller report long before it was made public. We've seen the illegal or immoral activity of elected officials brought to light. And we've seen federal efforts to obstruct justice thwarted because of the diligence of our press. But each of us also has a role in defending this right, whether through legal work, or as a public servant committed to transparency. And this means transparency in everything that we do, from our internal policies to how taxpayer dollars are used, to publicizing texts of legislation that we plan to enact, to cases that we have decided. Because a free society living in darkness cannot be free. And at every turn, on every occasion, at every juncture, we must use every tool at our disposal to advance transparency. We've made great strides in making important information available, but we certainly can and we must do better. And through these actions, we are making our democracy more representative, our government more accessible, and meeting the will of the people in a way that is worthy of our great republic. At moments like this, when the very fabric of who we are and what we believe in is challenged as it is presently, it is perhaps wise to be reminded that legal protections for the media and for average citizens are enshrined in America's founding document, and all of us must ensure that these protections remain firm and cemented in law. We are engaged in all of these actions not because we wish to be confrontational or contrarian. We are doing it because our moral compass dictates us to do it. We are doing it because we have an obligation to ensure the basic freedoms of our country. We are doing it because we believe that our founders got it right. And that must be a call from the press. They knew that the right to speak and think freely was paramount to a free society. And as we reflect today on the role of the free press and free speech and a free society, I hope that you will keep in mind our obligations as lawyers and officers of the court to uphold the rule of law and to safeguard our democracy. Established institutions and traditions, including the separation of power, our free speech, and independent judiciary, have all been vilified. But democracy requires that all of us push back against these attacks. Our ability to criticize government, our ability to speak and write freely, our ability to serve as a check on power must not be restrained. Virginia was the first state in our nation to declare that the freedoms of speech and of the press are among the greatest bulwarks of liberty and can never be subverted except by despotic governments. This is America, where tyrants will not reign, only freedom. And so, as I see the judge looking at me, I thank you. I thank you for all that you do in the service of law, and I thank you for welcoming me to this tradition.
Thank you, General James. Very inspiring. Our next speaker is Michael Miller, who's done such an extraordinary job as president this year, speaking out forcefully in defense of judicial independence and the rule of law, and setting in motion some very important initiatives to promote justice and improve our legal system, including a critical initiative to protect the safety and well-being of detained migrant children who have been separated from their parents, a new system, and we are most grateful for the new system for evaluating the qualifications of candidates who are seeking judicial office, recommendations to reduce wrongful convictions, and of course, the timely modernization of our standards of civility, just to name a few. President Miller?
Chief Judge DeFiore, Attorney General James, members of the Court of Appeals, Chief Administrative Judge Marx, members of the judiciary, distinguished colleagues, guests, and friends. We gather today on Law Day in this very special place devoted to the pursuit of justice. This is a day on which we celebrate the rule of law and reflect on the role of law, both in our constitutional democracy and in the foundation of our nation. This year, our focus is on freedom of expression, which is the very bedrock upon which our constitutional democracy is built. Over the past few years, we have witnessed an unprecedented assault upon this precious freedom, an assault which is both dangerous and alarming, an assault that undermines the American public's confidence in our most basic institutions of government, including Congress, the executive branch, the judiciary, and, of course, the press. The vitality and the very future of our constitutional democracy is threatened when public confidence in democracy's most basic institutions and ideals is lost. The past has shown us that freedom of expression is tyranny's greatest enemy. Throughout history, when authoritarian leaders have been unhappy with perceived criticism from the news media and others, they have often referred to those critics as the enemies of the people. And thereafter, frequently, blood has flowed and people have died. Former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara, commented at a forum during the State Bar's annual meeting earlier this year that democracy runs on the honor system. When confidence in the fundamental underpinnings of our system is eroded, that honor system is threatened. When the President of the United States directs subordinates to disregard duly issued subpoenas, democracy's honor system is breached and damage to the rule of law is done. When the President derides the judiciary whenever unhappy with a judicial decision, confidence in our system of government is eroded and damage is done. When a judge, duly approved by Congress, is referred to by the President as a so-called judge, damage is done. When the press is attacked as an institution because the President is unhappy with news media coverage, when lawful investigations are declared witch hunts, when the President labels any unflattering or critical story fake news, when the President declares that the press is the enemy of the people, he puts their safety and lives at risk, and damage is done. My friends, history has shown us that language matters, and it can have a profound impact. Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, frequently referred to Jews as a sworn enemy of the German people who posed a risk to the Führer's vision for Nazi Germany. Goebbels wrote, "If someone wears the Jewish star, he is an enemy of the people." This dangerous rhetoric and strategy of constant attack on adversaries used by Hitler and others in Nazi Germany led to some of the darkest days in modern history. But even before, during the period referred to as the Reign of Terror after the French Revolution, a law was enacted that established a special tribunal to punish the enemies of the people. Countless thousands were declared enemies of the people for crimes that included spreading false rumors and were summarily sent to the guillotine. Lenin is quoted as saying he found instructive the French policies against enemies of the people. And both Lenin and Stalin employed the term to all who disagreed with their policies or ideology, from political opposition leaders to members of the press, to members of the clergy who opposed state-mandated atheism, to people who wrote critical articles. Being called an enemy of the people could result in immediate imprisonment, banishment to a Russian gulag, or worse. And during the harshest days of the Cultural Revolution in China, Mao declared, "The social forces and groups which resist the socialist revolution and are hostile to or sabotage socialist construction are all enemies of the people." Now, it is frightening when any leader regularly uses the language from the tyrant's lexicon. But it is absolutely horrifying when that language is used by the President of the United States of America. And make no mistake about it, as you heard from Attorney General James, those words and the ideas they represent threaten free press right now. In Myanmar, 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists have been jailed for more than 16 months after they accurately reported on the government's massacre of members of the country's Rohingya Muslim minority. In the Philippines, 80 journalists have been murdered in the past 25 years, more than 30 in the past 2 years, and the current president continues to target individual reporters as well as the news media in general. And let us not forget the grotesquely brutal murder in the Saudi embassy in Turkey of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. May he rest in peace. Here in the United States of America, we have not seen such an assault on the truth and free expression as we are witnessing today since the McCarthy era in the 1950s. But one difference is that in today's digital age, as Judge DeFiore mentioned, an avalanche of utterly baseless claims and insults are tweeted and then repeated over and over in the social media echo chamber, over and over and over and over again. Through social media campaigns, there have been serious attacks on the essential institutions of our government, and real damage has been done to the public's confidence in these institutions. Now, I am by no means saying or suggesting that we cannot or should not take issue with any media coverage. But it is unfair and it is deeply dangerous to question without a modicum of evidence the integrity of the news media simply for criticizing or challenging political leaders. President Ronald Reagan warned that democracy is fragile. He said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." Recently, State Bar President-elect Hank Greenberg gave an extraordinary lecture about the inspiring leadership of Charles Evans Hughes during America's first Red Scare in 1919. As Hank noted, by defending the rights of 5 duly elected socialists to take their seats in the New York State Assembly, Hughes courageously demonstrated 100 years ago the importance of taking principled stands when fundamental values are at risk. And make no mistake, some of the most fundamental values of our democracy are profoundly at risk in ways that we have never seen before in our lifetime. I want to echo what Attorney General James said. It is absolutely essential for each of us, members of our great and noble profession, to honor our oath to protect and defend the Constitution and the America we cherish. That oath that each of us took demands of us a special obligation to defend America's values and its vital institutions. These are no ordinary times, for these are truly the times that try our souls. We dare not sit idly by on the sidelines as mere witnesses to the erosion of public confidence in the fundamental institutions of democracy and freedom. My friends, without a free press, there is no free society. We must protect the freedom of the press. What George Mason said in 1776 was one of the great bulwarks of liberty. The ideals enunciated in our Constitution and Bill of Rights have made America great. Our duty is to keep it so. We are confronted by a crisis of profound proportion, a massive and considered assault on everything we as lawyers are sworn to protect. What we do now will long be remembered. What we do now will define us for history. Thank you. God bless you. God bless this honorable court, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you, President Miller, for your passionate words. And these are indeed no ordinary times, but we now turn to focus on the positive, on the extraordinary people who do live and work in our community and who do portend well for a good and strong and solid future for all Americans. And to honor the service of these extraordinary individuals, I'm going to ask our Chief Administrative Judge for the state of New York, Larry Marx, to come up and tell us about their accomplishments. Thank you, Judge Marx.
Thank you, Chief Judge, and I think this will be a lighter, but I think equally inspiring portion of the Law Day program today. That's the presentation of the court system's Judith S.K. Service Awards. And I think some of you know in past years, we would give out a relatively small number of these awards to a deserving but small number of court employees. But last year, we took a different approach, presenting awards to a much larger group. And it worked pretty well, so we decided to go big again this year. The awards this year will be presented to unified court system employees from around the state, some for their service to the community, others for their life-saving actions in a medical emergency or their display of courage in protecting public safety. And I think this is going to be a little bit like a military operation, moving groups in, moving groups out, but we'll start by acknowledging this year's community service recipients. While all of the honorees could not be here today, I will mention them by name. They are Deputy Chief Clerk Serena Springle of a very popular employee from Civil Court, New York County, for her dedicated service as a St. Albans Veterans Hospital volunteer. And Captain Marcus Durham from the 3rd Judicial District for spending countless hours teaching life skills to young men in his community. In the 4th Judicial District, Lieutenant Christopher Fody of Schenectady County for his service over the past decade, organizing fundraising sports tournaments that have benefited numerous charities. And Court Officer Anton Lopresti of Saratoga City Court for his efforts spearheading a DWI information program for local high school students. In the 8th Judicial District, Principal Court Reporter Lori Ann Jasinski for her efforts coordinating holiday gift and other collections on behalf of the needy, as well as organizing animal rescue efforts. In the 9th Judicial District, Senior Court Office Assistant Tina Ramos of Orange County Family Court for her extensive volunteer service on behalf of military veterans. And Principal Court Attorney Stephanie Small. Principal Court Attorney Stephanie Small of Rockland County Surrogates Court for her wide-ranging volunteer activities, whether collecting toys for needy children or organizing fundraising events for the Alzheimer's Association. Congratulations, and thank you all for your generous service. Now on to our first set of honorees in the Heroism category. In response to New York's opioid crisis, in 2017, we instituted Narcan training for court officers and other court personnel. We are proud of all those who completed the training and thankful for the success of this statewide initiative, which has since saved numerous lives. Today, we pay tribute to the court officers and other court personnel who over the past year, while on duty, helped prevent overdose fatalities. Following a car accident outside Court of Appeals Hall, right here in Albany, Court Officer Joseph Mueller, Court Analyst Joseph Welch, Deputy Chief of Security Ronald Gadsden, Senior Clerical Assistant David Culligan, and Senior Security Attendant Travis Moore assisted the police officer on the scene, Christian Polcher, who's here today, in administering Narcan to the driver. From the Nassau County Courts, the following officers administered or helped administer Narcan or otherwise provided aid to avert an overdose fatality. Court officers Anthony Zuccaro and Anthony Beneri on May 25th, 2018. Court officer Leonard Lanyo and Sergeant Michelle Barrett on October 12th, 2018. In two separate incidents this past October 24th, court officers Beneri and Mark Pulo, and court officers Lanyo and Zuccaro. And this past February 4th, court officers Pulo and Darrow Johnson. The following Suffolk County court officers administered Narcan or otherwise aided in averting a drug fatality. On September 25th, 2018, court officers Juliette Ruperto, Janet Gotchman, John Tuffarello, Daniel Colapinto, Ronald Barber, and Richard Rocchio, Sergeant Regina Ritigliano, and Lieutenant Michael Voda. And on December 6, 2018, Court Officer Michael Savas, Sergeant Christopher Roth, and Lieutenant Daniel Friesen. And in the 5th Judicial District in Syracuse City Court, the following officers helped prevent a fatal overdose. Court officers Ronald Sweet, Robert Barone, and Brian Duck on June 13, 2018. And on September 7th, 2018, court officers Michael Hood, Cale Carroll, Lee Ovitt, and Diana Evans, and Sergeant Vicki Stevens. We are pleased to acknowledge this next group of employees for their quick, steady response to life-threatening medical emergencies. I'll begin with a group of New York City court officers who, interestingly, at a thruway stop on their way home from last year's Court of Appeals Law Day ceremony, administered life-saving aid to an inmate being transported by the Corrections Department. They are Court Officer Michael Biscelli, Major Brian Rice, Sergeant Salvatore Didana, and Senior Court Officer Elaine Bocci, all from Staten Island, and Court Officer Markel Sanders from Manhattan. Next, we pay tribute to a group of officers from our Court Officers Academy in Brooklyn, Captain Kevin Duckfield, and Lieutenants Erica Prosper, Barry Gong, Steve Vera, and Vincent St. Clair, who jumped into action administering CPR and other aid to revive a potential recruit who collapsed during physical ability testing in Manhattan this past August. Our next honoree is from Bronx County. We commend Court Officer Martin Prince for his life-saving actions in response to a fellow officer who began choking in the Bronx Hall of Justice locker room. In Queens County, we honor Sergeant David Vermeil and Court Officer Joshua Edwards for their skillful actions in aiding a defendant who began choking in the courtroom in Queens County Supreme Court. And we commend Suffolk County Court Officer Vincent Valerio for his life-saving actions at the Riverhead Courthouse in response to a fellow officer who was choking. In the 6th Judicial District, we are thankful to Sergeant Christopher Sullivan and Court Officers Cody Manning and Robert Paul for their coordinated response in assisting a man who had a seizure at the entrance of the Chemung County Justice Building the morning of November 26th. And again to Sergeant Sullivan and Court Officer Paul, who later that same day administered emergency aid to another man who had fallen and struck his head while inside the Justice Building. We are grateful to all of these first responders and congratulate them on receiving a Heroism Award. Okay, I'm expecting another group, but there they are. Okay, so our final group of Heroism Award recipients demonstrated exceptional courage and presence of mind in assisting law enforcement and emergency service colleagues over the past year. Beginning with our 4th Judicial District honorees for their off-duty actions, they are Sergeant Robert Boyle of Schenectady's Public Safety Office, who braved intense heat to drag a driver away from a tractor trailer that crashed and caught fire. Court Officer Tracy Rotz of Plattsburgh City Court, who apprehended an arson suspect. Court Officer Scott Garland and Court Officer Thomas McKenna of Schenectady, who intervened on behalf of a robbery victim, recovering the stolen money and alerting police. And Court Officer Trainee Jarrett Dumoulin of Fulton County, who assisted paramedics in aiding an elderly car accident victim, helping safely move the man from his car into the emergency services vehicle. Next, from the 5th Judicial District, Court Officer Joshua Hardesty of Lewis County and Court Officer Joshua Corbo of Onondaga County, that's 2 Joshuas, who, while out for a Sunday run along the Erie Canal, rescued a teen who'd fallen through the ice. Officer Hardesty plunged into the freezing water, while Officer Corbo helped him reach the teen and pull him back to shore. And from Nassau County, Senior Court Officer Daniel Robinson, who on his way to work risked his own safety to alert police to an erratic driver, following the vehicle and rushing to shift it into parking gear when it hit a curb. Another Long Island honoree, Court Officer Randy Caparco of Suffolk County, was returning home from work when he went to the aid of a family whose vehicle was overturned in a wooded area on the side of the road, helping free the mother from the vehicle. Next, our honorees from New York City, from Kings County Civil Court, Court Officer Christopher Spatola for subduing and apprehending a disruptive violent litigant while maintaining the safety of the courtroom. Officer Stephen Chan for his actions in helping apprehend a hit-and-run driver in Brooklyn. And Officer Anthony Lazaro, who outside his home helped police safely apprehend a suspect. From Kings County Criminal Court, Court Officers Henry Plant and Michelle Fratto, during a security sweep of the courthouse, they safely apprehended a felon with an open warrant. From Queens County Supreme Court Criminal Term, Court Officer Francis Torrey for his role in apprehending one of 2 suspects upon witnessing a robbery in Manhattan while off duty. And Court Officer Todd Smith, also for his off-duty actions on behalf of a robbery victim. Officer Smith apprehended one of 3 assailants. The next 2 honorees are from our Mobile Security Patrol Unit. While on patrol and en route to Brooklyn, Court Officers Robert Anderson and Renee Reddick were the first on the scene when a taxi burst into flames in the Hugh Carey Tunnel. After ensuring that the taxi driver was out of harm's way, the 2 officers helped clear the traffic, enabling the fire department to safely put out the blaze. And when a fight between rival gangs outside the Richmond County Supreme and Criminal Court building escalated into a shooting on July 10th, a contingent of court officers gave chase, pursuing the carjacked minivan involved in the incident. The van ultimately plowed into a house, pinning and killing the suspected gunman, with the court officers at gunpoint ordering the men out of the van, handcuffing them, recovering a loaded revolver, and securing the crime scene. These courageous officers include Major Michael Arcadi, Sergeants Kevin Sullivan, Christopher Melfi, and Leonard Donahue, court officers Michael Biscelli, Daniel Bossert, Mario Maratea, Daniel Cesaro, Michael Premiano, Peter DeSanti, and Raymond Thays, and court officer trainee Michael Maraventano. We are indebted to these exemplary officers for their acts of bravery. Let's give them a well-deserved round of applause. So on behalf of the entire court system, please accept our deepest appreciation to all our 2019 Judith S.K. Service Award recipients for their commitment and sense of responsibility to their colleagues and community. So we have one last special award, and I would ask if Judge Michael Kokoma could come up. So Judge Kokoma is the Deputy Chief Administrative Judge for the courts outside New York City, and he's going to be stepping down from that role in several weeks, and not retiring from the court system, but returning to the trial bench full-time. And when the judge told me this several weeks ago, he said that he had been in the role for 10 years, and 10 years is a long time. And that is true. But I know I speak for the Chief Judge as well when I say that he has done a superb job in that role over the past decade. The Deputy Chief Administrative Judge, the job covers enormous territory. It's excluding New York City, it's the rest of the state from the eastern tip of Long Island up to the Canadian border, out west to Buffalo and Niagara Falls. And Judge Kokoma really did cover all that territory. And, most of our court leadership is based downstate. So we've really viewed this role as our ambassador for the rest of the state. And you can't do that job just sitting behind your desk. You have to get out and cover the state on a very regular basis and explaining to the rest of the state our administrative policies and procedures, and overseeing the implementation of our programs and initiatives. And whenever difficulties arise and problems arise, and believe me, they do all the time, whenever and wherever that happens, they have to be addressed. And without a doubt, Judge Kokoma deserves so much credit for the spectacular success of the Excellence Initiative in dozens of counties across the state. And throughout all of that, he has always exhibited the highest level of competence and work ethic and loyalty. So we wanted to take the opportunity today, the Chief Judge and I, to present you with this award on Law Day is just a very small token of our appreciation for the outstanding job that you've done over the last decade. So on behalf of all of us, Judge Kokoma, thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing I'd like to say about Judge Kokoma. In the midst of all of his responsibilities and obligations as the Deputy Chief Administrative Judge, he still managed to try cases and do an outstanding job in his service actually on the trial bench. And also, if you will notice his tie today, the travel I don't think was that difficult. He's got his Harley-Davidson tie on, and he used to travel around the state. Thank you, Michael, for your wonderful, wonderful service to us. So, in the world that my judicial colleagues and I live in, Law Day is really every day, and it is our sincere hope that the celebration of this year's theme will inspire everyone here and across the nation to do their very best to contribute to our shared mission, which is, of course, to promote the understanding of and the respect for the rule of law. Thank you all so very much for being here with us, and God bless you all.